Someone is telling you something terrible, serious news, a tragedy, a moment that calls for nothing but gravity, and your face, to your absolute horror, does the unthinkable. It smiles. A laugh bubbles up from somewhere, completely inappropriate, utterly out of place, and you fight desperately to hold it down. You're not amused. You're not cruel. So why on earth would you laugh at the worst possible moment? Why do we sometimes giggle at funerals, smile through bad news, or burst out laughing when we're frightened or in trouble? The answer reveals something surprising about what laughter is actually for. Here's the first thing that has to be unlearned. Laughter is not only, or even mainly, a response to humor. We think of laughing as what we do when something is funny, but that's just one of its uses. At its root, laughter is a tool for managing emotion and getting through social situations, and it shows up in all kinds of contexts that have nothing to do with comedy. In fact, most laughter in everyday life isn't triggered by jokes at all. It happens in conversation, in moments of connection, in tension, in awkwardness. Laughter is far more about regulating feeling and signaling to others than it is about funniness. So what is nervous laughter actually doing? The leading explanation is that it's a release valve for overwhelming emotion. When you're flooded with intense feeling, fear, stress, grief, shock, tension, the emotion builds up with enormous force and needs somewhere to go. And laughter is one of the body's mechanisms for discharging that buildup, for releasing the pressure. The strong emotion is too much to contain, so the body reaches for the nearest available outlet, and sometimes that outlet is laughter, even when the emotion driving it is the opposite of joy. You're not laughing because it's funny, you're laughing because you're overflowing. This connects to how close the body's intense emotions actually are to one another. Physically, the arousal of fear and the arousal of excitement, the surge of stress and the surge of mirth share a great deal. The body's high-intensity states are not as separate as they feel from the inside. So when you're gripped by powerful fear or stress, the system is already in a state of high arousal, and that arousal can spill over, tipping into laughter, almost as if the emotional circuitry crosses its wires. The line between I'm terrified and I'm laughing is thinner than we imagine, because underneath, the body is doing something remarkably similar in both. There's a theory that gets at why this happens in moments of shock or distress specifically. The idea is that laughter often arises from a kind of mismatch, a collision between what we expect and what's actually happening, or between two conflicting things we're feeling at once. When you're hit with terrible news, part of your mind grasps the gravity, while another part can't quite absorb it, can't make it real, and that jarring internal conflict, that clash between registers, can trigger laughter. The laugh is the sound of your mind colliding with something it can't immediately process, two incompatible responses crashing together and spilling out. Nervous laughter also serves a social function, which is part of why it shows up in tense interactions with other people. A nervous laugh can be a signal, a way of saying I'm uncomfortable, or please don't take this as a threat, or let's ease this tension. In awkward or strained moments, laughter can act as a social lubricant, an attempt to diffuse the discomfort, to soften the situation, to reach for connection when things feel tense. So when you laugh in an uncomfortable confrontation, or giggle in an awkward silence, part of what's happening is an instinctive social move, an effort to release the strain between you and someone else and signal that you mean no harm. There may be something almost protective in it too, a way the mind shields itself from being completely overwhelmed. When an emotion is too intense, too painful, too much to face head-on all at once, laughter can create a tiny bit of distance, a small release that keeps you from being entirely flooded. It's a bit like a pressure relief valve on a boiler, letting out just enough to prevent the whole system from being overwhelmed by the force of the feeling. The laugh, strange and inappropriate as it seems, may be the mind's way of coping with something it isn't ready to absorb in full. This is why nervous laughter often shows up precisely in the heaviest moments: funerals, emergencies, deep grief, terrifying situations, serious confrontations. These are exactly the moments of greatest emotional intensity, when the buildup of feeling is most extreme, and so they're exactly when the release valve is most likely to open. People sometimes feel deep shame about laughing at a funeral or smiling through a crisis, convinced it means they're callous or broken. But it's often the opposite. The laughter can be a sign of how intensely you're feeling, how overwhelmed you are, your body reaching for any way to handle an emotion that's simply too big. It's important to really sit with this, because the shame around nervous laughter can be heavy. If you've ever laughed at a terrible moment and then hated yourself for it, certain it revealed something cold or wrong in you, understand what was actually happening. You weren't taking the situation lightly. You were so flooded with emotion that your body reached for a release, and laughter was what came. It's not a measure of how little you care. If anything, it's often a measure of how much, of how powerfully the moment hit you, of how much feeling you were trying to manage. The laugh was your nervous system coping, not your heart failing. Understanding this can also help you respond with more grace when you see it in others. When someone laughs at an inappropriate moment, in a crisis, at sad news, in a tense confrontation, it's easy to judge them as insensitive. But now you know it's frequently a sign of distress, of nervousness, of being overwhelmed, not of indifference. The person laughing at the worst moment may be the one feeling the most, struggling to hold an emotion too large to contain. A little compassion, for them and for yourself, fits the situation far better than judgment. None of this means nervous laughter is always welcome, or that you can't work to manage it in moments where it would cause real harm. If you know you're prone to it, awareness helps, recognizing that intense situations may trigger the urge, and understanding that it's a stress response you can sometimes redirect by breathing, by grounding yourself, by naming internally what you're feeling. But the goal isn't to be ashamed of it. The goal is to understand it, so that when it happens, you don't pile self-judgment on top of an already overwhelming moment. The laughter is a quirk of being human, not a flaw in your character. The next time you feel that horrifying, inappropriate laugh rising up at exactly the wrong moment, in the face of bad news, in a tense confrontation, in a moment that calls for solemnity, try to recognize what's really happening. Your body is overwhelmed, flooded with an emotion too intense to contain, and it's reaching for a release valve, and laughter is what came out. It isn't disrespect, and it isn't coldness. It's your nervous system trying to survive too much feeling all at once. Be gentle with yourself. That awful, untimely laugh is one of the strangest and most human things your body does, and it usually means you were feeling far more, not less, than the moment seemed to allow.